Hello everyone. So for today's card, I'm kind of killing two birds with one stone. Tonight's post starts off my favorite things November countdown. So all of the stamps and dies I'm using on this card are not yet available. They will be available next Tuesday, and I will have all that info in my blog post, which will be linked directly below the video. So I started with the new Cozy Mittens Dynamics, and I die cut some MFT raspberry felt with them. I love their felt and die cutting because that stuff die cuts like no problem. Like one pass through my die cut machine. So I die cut the felt, and then the craft and raspberry cardstock I die cut with the largest dies from the new Blueprints 20 Dynamics. And then to embellish my little mittens, I just ran the Cozy Mittens Dynamics again through my machine, this time with just some white cardstock. I thought about doing white felt, but I wanted to stamp on it, and yeah, I don't have good luck when I stamp on felt. When I see other people do it, they come up with like these great results, and it never works for me, so I don't even bother trying anymore. One of these days I should experiment, but anyway, I die cut the cardstock, and then I stamped this little coordinating stamp from the Cozy Mittens stamp set onto it with the raspberry ink. And then to adhere it to the mittens, I just use hot glue. When it comes to working with felt, hot glue is my friend. It just works the best, it adheres the best, and I never have a problem with it. So my little teensy hot glue gun gets quite a workout when I use felt. So did that. And then I wanted to make sure I had kind of my layout planned properly because I wanted to use this sentiment. And then there's a string stamp from the little Cozy Mittens stamp set that I wanted to use as well. So I wanted to make sure everything kind of fit on my card. And then after I did that, I decided I wanted some pattern on my craft cardstock. And this is where I kind of made my first mistake. There are some things on this card, if I could redo it, if I'd had the time to redo it, I totally would. Things that I was actually I didn't expect to happen. So I inked up, this is a stamp from the new Nordic Knit set. I'm using a ton of new stamps and dies on here. But yeah, I inked it up with natural ink instead of craft ink, just because when natural ink dries on craft cardstock, it's almost like a watermark effect. It's just a lot lighter, and I just thought it would just give a subtle pattern. I didn't want it to be like in your face. So I stamped it all over the craft panel here, and then made sure I didn't have ink all over my work area so that I don't smear it on any cardstock. And because I wanted my sentiment to be white, and I wanted to emboss it. So I don't want the embossing powder to stick to any of this ink. And even though it's dye ink, it takes a while to dry. I didn't have time to let it set aside to dry, which is what I should have done. So I thought if I used enough anti-static powder, I should be good. So I coated the area really, really well, tested it out with the embossing powder before I even stamped, and it was still kind of clinging. So I used my anti-static tool again and like really rubbed it on there. And the first thing I was worried about was I was gonna like rub the ink off, because you can't tell on camera, but I was really rubbing the anti-static tool on there. But the ink seemed fine, so that was okay. So then I stamped my sentiment with Sweet Tooth pigment ink. And don't worry, I'm not burning my hand on camera. It actually looks like I'm getting really close to the nozzle there of the hot glue gun, but I was well aware of where the heat was. So stamped the sentiment, poured on my detail white embossing powder, removed any stray pieces with just a little paintbrush. And then this is where it got interesting. I heated the sentiment with my heat tool, and it basically made the ink around that area disappear. So I don't know if it's just from overheating, because it was funny because I actually had used my heat tool a few minutes before this to like speed up the pattern to dry, and it was fine. So I just think if you use too much, I don't know, it was just weird. It was a combination of like the powder and the heat. I don't know, it was weird. So if I was to redo this, I would stamp and emboss the sentiment, then stamp the pattern, and then just wipe off any of the pattern that got on top of the sentiment, and we would have been fine. So that's a hint too. That's another reason why I decided to share this card and not just scrap the whole thing. Because one, like I said, I didn't have time to redo all this, refilm, remake the card. I just didn't have the time. The past few weeks have been crazy as always. So learn from my mistakes. So anyway, went along with it. I adhered the mittens with my hot glue. Then I could unplug my hot glue gun and move it, so I don't have to worry about burning myself. And then I adhered, and then I stamped the string with just the raspberry ink. And then I adhered the panel to the raspberry cardstock. And then I'm adhering this to my card base, which is just a standard A2 size card, so 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. And this is where I make my second mistake. I grabbed the same pattern stamp, the Nordic Knits pattern stamp, and I inked it up with the natural ink, and I decided I wanted to stamp it along the bottom of the inside of the card. And as I was doing that, I was telling myself how much I like the natural ink because, again, it dries so nice and light. You can write over it. So I was like, well, why don't I make the whole inside of the card patterned? Which is totally fine. But what I should have done was started at the top of the inside, not at the bottom. One, it's easier to line up, and two, you'll see why in a minute. And as I was doing this, I knew I knew I shouldn't be doing this. But I kept going anyway. And sorry, my head kind of gets here in the way here because I'm trying to make sure I got everything lined up. But you can see I've got too much space and I didn't want to stamp past the fold because you want it to look neat. So I just took my Post-it masking tape and masked off the top area here. But even then, I knew with everything being adhered to the outside of the card, there was too much of a bump. So I'm not stamping on a flat surface anymore. So even though I'm trying to compensate and press really, really hard, I knew it wasn't going to stamp perfectly, even as I was doing it, and it didn't. So that really bothers me OCD wise. But again, I didn't have time to redo it. But if I did, I would either stamp from the top down or stamp the inside before I adhered the card front. So either way would have worked. But I just kept going with it. So I'm going to stamp another sentiment. These are the new Cozy Greetings set. That's where these two sentiments came from. So yeah, and that was the card. So as always, there will be links below. There will be a disclaimer saying the links will not work until Tuesday, so you'll be taken to a blank page. So just make sure to check out my blog post with all that info. And yeah, I will see you guys next time. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.